It was the 20th of February, 1943, when we of I Battalion, SS Panzer Regiment 3, set off from Poltawa for Karlovka. I remember gripping the side of my hatch as we rolled out, the steel tracks biting into an unforgiving sheet of ice that covered the roads. The cold was so fierce it felt as if the air itself could cut through flesh. We rumbled along in our columns. My tank, along with 4 others from the Heavy Panzer Company, 4th Company, struggled to keep traction. Soon enough, it all went wrong. 6 tanks slid helplessly off the road, including our commander's Befehlspanzer. I watched in disbelief as SS Hauptsturmführer Meyerdress's command tank skidded and then lurched sideways, plunging nose first into a frozen ditch. A truck from our company even overturned, its wheels spinning futilely in the air before being hauled back to Poltawa for repairs. By the time we finally crawled into Karlovka in the early hours of the 22nd, 13 of our tanks were listed as damaged. The men were tired, angry, but determined. From Karlovka, we received fresh orders to push north of Pereshchepino and regroup. As we neared the village, our nerves tensed. Russian forces launched a sudden attack on our right flank, trying to seize the road. I felt our panzer jolt as the driver throttled up and we swung into the open fields, 1st Company taking point. Through my periscope, I saw the first rooftops appear, thin tendrils of smoke twisting into the cold air. When the Russians came, we were ready. Our main guns roared, and the enemy's anti-tank positions were blasted apart. By evening, we had cleared and captured Pereshchepino. It was there that tragedy struck our unit. I still see it clearly. As SS Obersturmbannführer Rinner's Tiger edged across a frozen river at the village's edge, the ice groaned and then gave way with a sickening crack. In seconds, the heavy Tiger plunged into the freezing water, submerging up to the turret. The driver never made it out. He drowned inside that steel coffin. Not long after, another Tiger broke through the ice, though we managed to salvage it later in mid-April with the help of our panzer engineers. We of 4S Company logged everything meticulously. I recall the cold clarity of that entry. When Rinner's Tiger reached the river, the bridge was too narrow and couldn't bear the Tiger's immense weight. Without warning, the ice collapsed. Nearby, our Werkstatt platoon set up next to a lonely windmill, and soon the Bergerstaffel, the recovery detachment, arrived. On the 27th, SS Untersturmführer Greisinger gave the order to attempt recovery. After scouting the site the previous day, the very day our beloved divisional commander, SS Obergruppenführer Eicke, was killed, the news shook us. Command passed to SS Brigadeführer Max Simon. With 5 heavy 18-ton half-tracks pulling at the Tiger, 4 at the front, 1 at the rear, we finally dragged the beast from the river. To our relief, it wasn't a total loss. It had to be towed all the way to Dnipropetrovsk for major repairs, marking the Werkstatt platoon's first large-scale recovery. There was a grim pride among us that day. The night of the 22nd to the 23rd saw us massing south of Pereshchepino before advancing toward Verbki. By mid-morning on the 24th, our battalion, with 3rd Company leading, struck Vyasowak. The fighting was brisk. We knocked out 2 Russian anti-tank guns, but lost a Panzer III in the process. By nightfall, we regrouped north of the Popasnoye-Pavlograd road. That same night, our lighter support column engaged in skirmishes near Negestovka, pitching camp near Kochereshki. From the 25th through the 26th, we battled through Zaredarovka and Strasnoy. The weather was merciless. Icy winds slicing through any gap in our clothing, snow swirling so thick we could barely see. On the 27th, we finally secured Zaredarovka. I remember warming my hands over a small stove near the tracks, while our battalion formed up along the railway at Sakajevsky. One of our Panzer IIIs from 2nd Company broke down. Its fuel pump shot. Around this time, our leadership shifted again. Rinner was reassigned as regimental adjutant, but would fall just weeks later, on 21st March. His place went to SS Obersturmbannführer Schroeder, with SS Untersturmführer Kohler taking over half-platoon command. By the 28th, we found ourselves assembling along the Panjutina road. Repairs were stacking up. I counted 13 panzers awaiting work by the end of February. Meanwhile, our Werkstatt platoon operated out of Orelka, moving vehicles only in the mornings. The afternoons were spent dragging trucks out of deep mud. Every 100 meters along the main road, another vehicle sat stuck or blown to twisted scrap. Our entire column stretched over a kilometer. I joined a 7-man crew tasked with freeing a Mercedes truck bogged down under the weight of a Tiger engine it carried. Fortune favored us. Nearby was a truck equipped with a crane. Most of our platoon remained in Orelka, slogging through endless recovery tasks. Gunther Trauper of 6th Company later recounted an almost comical episode. Rinner had promised to send a Tiger to tow them out of trouble. They waited for what seemed like eternity, fearing engineers might decide to destroy their immobilized Panzer III just to keep it from the Russians. Eventually, a vehicle did appear, but it was merely a Panzer IV, a small Tiger, as he called it, which nonetheless hauled them to safety. March came with no mercy. Between the 1st and 2nd, we fought in Uljanovka and Jefremovka. On the 2nd, the SS Panzer Corps received a fresh delivery of Tiger engines, which lifted morale slightly. By the 3rd of March, our Werkstatt platoon had been working 4 solid days in Nizhny Oral, overhauling tired engines and battered running gear. That very day marked our Tiger Company's first combat action in Russia. Together, we smashed a Russian regimental column moving west from Dimitrovka to Grushino. I was part of that action, seated inside a Panzer III under the command of Bieber. Our gunner was Hempfinger, loader Hitz, driver Walter Gansera, and Theo Engels manned the radio. We advanced behind a Tiger, nerves tight. Hempfinger and I passed a cigarette between us, trying to mask our dread. It felt almost like watching fireworks, until the shout came, "Make ready!" Hatches closed. I slammed a shell into the breach, heart pounding. Suddenly, T-34s loomed ahead. Our Tiger surged forward, guns barking. The Russians threw everything at us. Our 5-centimeter gun felt woefully small. Then disaster. Hempfinger couldn't turn the turret. A stray machine gun belt had jammed in the ring. I cursed and we surged straight at the Russians to avoid shots from an anti-tank gun, which Berger's Tiger promptly silenced. Berger, that old hand, also knocked out at least 2 T-34s, though I couldn't be sure. Then horror struck. A Russian dog with an explosive pack darted under our Panzer. An earth-shaking blast. Our track shredded, we lurched to a stop. I reported the damage to Mooslechner, who ordered me out to inspect. Clambering down with just my toolkit, a hammer, and my pistol, I started hammering at the mangled links. All the while, Berger's Tiger kept up suppressing fire, buying me precious moments. It felt as though the entire company held its breath, waiting for me to finish. That was the war for us in those brutal days, a tangle of ice, fire, mud, and raw nerves, each moment perched between triumph and oblivion. I finally managed to get that cursed track back in place. My hands were numb from the cold and caked with oil and mud, but when I swung myself back inside and gave the thumbs up, we lurched forward. Relief flooded through me. Over the intercom, Mooslechner's voice crackled with rare warmth. "Well done, Panzer 424. I almost grinned. For a fleeting moment, we felt like heroes. Later, a Hauptscharführer visited our crew. He had just come from speaking with the company commander. "He says your Tiger performed like a wolf among sheep," the Hauptscharführer told us. "Everything you fired at, you destroyed," said it made him feel unbeatable. Hearing that, even with the exhaustion weighing on us, put new steel in our spines. In the first days of March, our battalion, alongside other units from Totenkopf, moved to assist the Das Reich boys. We worked to encircle a Russian tank brigade and helped capture Ochotchaje. On the 6th, they pulled us back into Corps Reserve for a breather, or so we hoped. By the 8th, we were back at it, ordered into the sector south of Wolki towards Stary Merchik. I'll never forget what happened near Grijakovo on the 8th of March. Our column had only driven some 10 kilometers when we hit our next hurdle. Just 300 meters ahead lay a river, frozen over and deceptively still. There was no bridge capable of holding a Tiger's weight. SS Untersturmführer Kohler decided to gamble. His Tiger made it a fair distance out when the ice shattered beneath them. The whole tank plunged through, water rushing into every compartment. Kohler and his crew scrambled out, soaked to the bone, shivering uncontrollably. Kohler looked utterly defeated. SS Untersturmführer Rathsack rolled up next in his Tiger and tried his luck crossing elsewhere. His Tiger didn't break through the ice, it simply sank backward into the embankment. The engine compartment flooded with slush and freezing water. Our Werkstatt men got right to work on Rathsack's machine, draining and pulling it out. But Kohler's Tiger was a different beast. We rounded up a horde of Russian civilians and had them pile earth into a huge mound to reach the sunken tank. Days crawled by. When it was finally close enough, our mechanics ran hoses into the Tiger and pumped it dry. I still hear our driver telling his version of that day, which he dubbed the Bath of Grijakovo. He couldn't recall the exact name of the river. All he knew was it was the 8th of March. The company had already lost a Tiger and its driver to drowning days before. Now it was our turn to face the ice. The nearby bridge could take only 6 tons, shaky at best, while our Tigers weighed 50. We needed to get across to support operations in Walki and Charkow. We were the crew of Kohler's Tiger. I was the driver. Mochnik manned the gun. Hans Rex loaded shells. Grunuth worked the radio. I tried the bridge, one look, and I backed off. So we moved left and decided to cross the river ice directly. Before we went, I stuffed my pockets with butter, liverwurst, bread. I even moved my pistol to my right hip. If I went under, I wanted at least a chance to shoot myself before I drowned. Kohler's voice came softly over the intercom, steady but strained. As we crept forward, I could hear the ice groaning, cracking. We could see the far bank. We were almost there. I remember thinking that if we made it, we'd toast our luck with schnapps. Then, like something out of a nightmare, the whole Tiger jolted up, then dropped. Freezing water surged in. I tried forcing my hatch open, but the weight of the river above held it shut. The inside of the tank filled quickly. My thick winter clothes tangled around me. A box of rations jammed the tight corridor. I clawed my way toward the turret, my breath ragged. Water was at my chin. My life flashed past. My mother, my sister, my father. With everything I had, I pushed through the turret hatch. Suddenly, air. A comrade on shore tried reaching for me, then sprinted off and returned with a ladder. I grabbed hold, and they hauled me up. My body went limp, and darkness swallowed me. When I came around, I was wrapped in furs inside a Russian hut. Later, we recovered the Tiger mid-April and dragged it to Dnipropetrovsk for a full overhaul. By then, we were already on the move again. We reunited with the company at Budi. Kohler had returned. Our radio man spent time in hospital, but came back soon after. That period near Grijakovo, scrounging for fresh food with Hermann and Hans, was oddly one of my happiest memories in Russia. Strange how war twists your notions of joy. Just days later, on the 10th of March, we were busy servicing our tanks, full ammo racks, everything stocked. Some of our boys were resting in a house nearby with SS Unterscharführer Hackel, our gunner Hempfinger, and Theo Engels. I was fussing over a mechanical issue on our Tiger when shots cracked through the air. Muzzle flashes spat from the windows of that house. Russians, we thought, must be launching a raid. We returned fire instinctively, machine guns hammering. Then Hackel stumbled from the doorway, clutching his chest. I sprinted over, catching him under the arms as he collapsed, blood soaking through his tunic. Someone climbed into our turret and raked the house with MG fire. Hempfinger and Engels came back soon after with a partisan prisoner. A bullet had even torn through Hempfinger's trousers and lodged in his cigarette case. Luck or providence, who can say? Only days later, another comrade was crushed when a Tiger accidentally reversed into a house he was sitting in. Such was life for us. One moment laughter, the next morning. On 10th March, our second company was attached to Das Reich. The next day, the mighty Leibstandarte swept into Charkov by surprise, while we pushed toward Chugujev and Rogan, slicing into Russian supply lines. By the 12th, we were assigned under Kampfgruppe Baum, readying to storm Chugujev. That afternoon, we got tangled in brutal fighting at Bolshaya Danilovka. Baum talked about taking Chugujev by night, but reports of Russian tanks prowling our rear lines forced us to hold positions. We spent that night ensuring our supply and communication lines weren't cut, a tense, sleepless vigil. We lost a Panzer, 3 that day. The 13th saw us pushing toward Rogan, slowed by both the Russians and the weather. On the 14th, we sat nearly idle, waiting for precious fuel. Then, on the 15th and 16th, we fought house to house in northern Charkow and Chugujev. SS Obersturmbannführer Riefkogel personally led 2 counterattacks that shattered Russian armoured thrusts, destroying 9 of their tanks at the cost of 1 of ours. On the 18th of March, the Army's 6th Panzer Division took over security of Chugujev. We shifted under the 2nd SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment to Eike, led by SS Sturmbannführer Launer, advancing on Belgorod. The weather again hampered us. Launer called a halt for the night. On the 19th, we clawed through Sybrovka and toward the heights at Ivanovka. It was there we lost our company commander, SS Hauptsturmführer Muslechner. A faulty fuse set off a shell inside his Tiger, an awful, violent end. SS Hauptsturmführer Biermeier took over. On the 21st, our old regimental adjutant Rinner was seriously wounded by artillery near Staritsa. By the 22nd, we held at Ternowaya, tending to our battered machines. That same day, a new directive from Hitler arrived. All Waffen-SS heavy companies would now field 14 Tigers instead of 9. On the 24th, 20 Tiger crews were handpicked to travel back to Germany to collect fresh tanks. 6 of our crews set off for Paderborn 2 days later. Then on the 27th, I watched as SS Stürmen Fritz Hitz received the Iron Cross 2nd Class for his valour on the 3rd of March. Even among so much darkness, there were moments of pride. By then, the 320th Infantry Division began relieving our Totenkopf elements. We pulled back south of Belgorod to regroup. With Charkov and Belgorod in German hands, it felt like we'd secured a mighty prize. But in the back of our minds, we all sensed it. This was probably the last grand victory the Reich would ever see on the Eastern Front. On 2 April 1943, our battalion, ISS Panzer Regiment 3, was ordered to Nikolskoye to reorganize. By then, the strain from Charkov had worn deep into our ranks, and it showed in the leadership. Just a day later, our regimental commander, SS Sturmbannführer Leiner, was relieved of his post for what higher command called failings during the battles for the city. They brought in SS Sturmbannführer Kunzmann to take his place. SS Sturmbannführer Borkmann shifted over to command 2 SS Panzer Regiment 3. Even among us, lowly crewmen, it was clear the brass was tightening the reins. On 22nd April, they ordered our heavy panzer company, 4th Company, to restructure under the new Kastien 1176E. It meant we'd now have 3 platoons, each with 4 Tigers, plus 2 more in the company headquarters. The 4th platoon was dissolved outright. I watched as SS Oberscharführer Berger stepped up to replace Spiessbauer as our new company sergeant on the 1st of May. Bauer was lucky, he got to go home on leave. Most of us hadn't seen home in over a year. Around this time, we pulled into an assembly area west of Charkow. Fresh faces joined us. Krowatsky, Brieger, Glockel, Lloyds, Wagner. Green men, but keen. They didn't yet carry that same distant stare so many of us had. On that same day, 1st May, our battalion received orders to adjust again, this time to include 2 medium tank companies and a so-called light company. In truth, we wound up with a 4th company fitted out with Panzer IVs. By early June, 4th Company had 14 brand new Panzer I4s under SS Obersturmbannführer Hackel. The delivery was meant for another unit, but the shifting demands of the front redirected them to us. Meanwhile, our Tigers, still officially the heavy punch, were redesignated from 4th Company to 9th Company under 2nd SS Panzer Regiment 3. Our Panzer III escorts were passed off to 3rd Company. By early May, the steady trickle of reinforcements continued. I remember Lemkuhl arriving from Regiment Thule, along with Lommer, Keller, Probst, Schule. Then Benneker and Herter showed up later that month. Their uniforms were still stiff and fresh, their boots hardly scuffed. On 10th May, 3 of our Tigers returned from deep repairs in Dnipropetrovsk. We rolled out for Jushi the next day, a 2-day haul to yet another staging ground. By then, 8th Company had joined 2nd Battalion, equipped with 15 more Panzer I4s. On the 20th, we of 9th Company moved to Budi. It felt like we were endlessly shuffling positions, gearing up for something bigger. That something arrived by late June. We marched into a new assembly area, this time preparing for what everyone whispered was going to be the decisive blow, Operation Citadel, the attack on the Kursk salient. We quartered in Blishnitz. By 3rd July, we were hunkered down near Rakovo, lined up with Strelezoye, Kashioye, Besanovka. Our ranks were reshuffled once again. Biermeier still led us, Schroeder handled the company staff, Kohler took 1st Platoon, Quaid the 2nd, and Rassak the 3rd. We knew the scale of the forces gathering. SS Sturmgeschütze Abteilung 3 hatte 35 Stüks, dank einer Lieferung von 14 neuen Sturmgewehren im Mai. Our Panzerjägers held 11 of those heavy Paquet self-propelled guns. It was meant to be an iron hammer. When dawn broke in early July, we finally surged out from Rekovo to kick off Citadel. Almost immediately, a Panzer III went up in smoke barely a mile and a half outside the village. Mine, artillery, no one was sure. 9th Company was attached to I Battalion to support our grenadiers from SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment 5 Totenkopf. We hit our first obstacle, a tank ditch. Engineers scrambled forward under covering fire from our Tigers and the nearby Stu-Gs. Russian shells clawed the earth all around. Once the ditch was cleared, we pushed on toward Hill 216.5. By afternoon, we were down to just 6 Tigers in fighting order, 5 crippled by mines. Our Stu-G comrades fared no better. 3 knocked out by anti-tank fire, 4 sidelined by mines. On the 6th of July, we shifted support to the 2nd Battalion of Totenkopf Grenadiers for the assault on Hill 225.9. The Luftwaffe swept in, dive bombers howling. We then wheeled toward Tanauka. Tiger 902 struck a mine. I remember seeing its crew up all night under a dim lamp, wrestling with the track. By the 7th, we were slugging it out near Nepajevo. Over by Smorodino, Tiger 912 took a direct artillery hit. SS Unterscharführer Richard Muller and his gunner Zimmermann were killed instantly. The next day was a hammer blow. Kunzmann, our regimental commander, died when his command tank was struck twice by anti-tank rounds. Bochmann stepped up to take the regiment. Biermeier moved up to command the battalion. Schroeder, our new company leader, didn't last the day. An anti-tank rifle round punched through his turret. Kohler, from 1st Platoon, took over. Gockel, from our ranks, was killed the same day. We fought desperately around Hill 209.5. Tiger 911 broke down, had to limp back for repairs. By 9th July, we clawed forward into Lotchki and Kochatovka. The next day, our commander's Tiger rolled over yet another mine. Meanwhile, 2 of our repaired Tigers rejoined us. We assaulted near Kluchi, breaking through with help from a brutal Stuka bombardment. On the 11th, Tiger 911 broke down again, this time mechanical trouble. We dug in near Vasilyevka, bracing to support I Battalion. That night, we crossed the Sel River on a shaky improvised bridge west of Bogorodiskoye. The bridge groaned under our Tigers' weight. On 12th July, we launched an assault on Andreyevka along the Sel's south bank. Kohler, who'd just taken command of the company, was killed near Kluchi. SS Hauptsturmführer Richter, a Knight's Cross holder, took over. By then, we had 4 Tigers sidelined in repair. 2 needed at least 4 days of work, while 2 others were patched up and back with us by the afternoon. 3 more were still being poured over by the Werkstatt crews. Looking back now, it's hard to fathom the sheer churn of men and machines, the constant patching and breaking, the endless funerals we never really had time to mourn. From Charkov to Kursk, from mud-choked rivers to fields lit up by burning tanks, we lived on borrowed time. And in some quiet corner of my mind, I knew it was only a matter of when, not if, my luck would finally run out. On the 13th of July, SS Untersturmführer Schöffler showed up to join our battered company, having been transferred in from the 2nd SS Panzer Corps Tiger Battalion. He had some mileage on him already. Served with SS Krachertsen Battalion 2 from early 42 to January 43, so he wasn't some green recruit. The heavy SS Panzer Battalion he came from, under SS Sturmbannführer Lachmann, had only just arrived at the Eastern Front that month. They'd unloaded at Lubotin and were pressed straight into infantry roles. That's how desperate things were getting. By then, our 9th Company was down to 4 operational Tigers. On that same day, we saw limited skirmishing around Hill 226 and along the Kartashoka Road. But by evening, every last one of our Tigers was out of commission. Mines, mechanical failures, enemy guns, it all piled up. All 14 Tigers from our company ended up back in the Werkstatt for repairs. We were running on fumes. On the 15th, the Totenkopf pulled out of the Psel bridgehead and set up new lines on the south bank of the river. The following day, news came down that Hitler had called off Operation Citadel. Even though Manstein was sure we could still salvage something by continuing the drive, the decision was final. They planned to roll into Operation Roland next, meant to involve our 2nd SS Panzer Corps. But by the 17th, fresh orders rerouted the Liebstandarte and Das Reich to regroup near Belgorod instead. And that same day, a plane landed at Volchenka-Charkov, hauling spare parts all the way from Magdeburg for our Tigers. We picked them up from Panzer Instandsetzung Abteilung 545. By the 18th, our company and I battalion were supporting the 167th Infantry Division near Iwanowskic. The next day, we were repositioned around Lutski. Then on the 20th, new orders came down. Das Reich and Totenkopf were to redeploy some 400 kilometers south. The tracked vehicles would be loaded up at Belgorod and Charkov. It was also reported that through Citadel, Totenkopf lost 2 Panzer IIIs, 8 Panzer IVs, a single Tiger, and 1 Stu-G written off for good. That might look light on paper, but each knocked-out tank was dozens of men risking everything to keep it running. By 22nd July, we rumbled into Charkov for loading. 2 days later, we unloaded at the Mius front near Stalino-Rikovo. On the 29th, we picked up 8 more Tigers from SS Panzer Regiment 1 in Ardemansk. They were on their way to Italy, so they handed them off to us. They also gave us 30 Panzer Eifs and 4 Panzer IIIs. With this, we reformed the 4th Platoon, putting SS Hauptscharführer Berger in charge. The rest of the company was spread. Rathsack took 1st Platoon, Quaid the 2nd, Schoeffler the 3rd. Each had 5 Tigers, plus 2 more with the company HQ. All told, we had about 55 support vehicles rattling along with us. Wagner wrote about these days, how we assembled near Belgorod on the 5th of July in a wood. Luftwaffe planes streaked overhead. By midday, we fell in behind I Battalion. A truck from our support section tagged behind 1st Platoon, another arrived driven by Casimir, but we lost a Mercedes-fueled truck. It took a hit from Russian anti-tank fire and exploded, billowing flames high into the sky. 2 of our Tigers bogged down, others hit mines and lost tracks. I still remember seeing Biermeier, Probst, and the driver trying to fix the commander's Tiger while it sat helpless in a minefield. Meanwhile, Quaid and Rathsack moved the rest into nearby woods. The next day, Russian bombers pounded our positions. That was when Kunstmann was killed. Bochmann stepped up as regimental commander. Biermeier took the 2nd Battalion and Schroeder took our Tiger Company. Schroeder didn't last a day. Killed by an anti-tank rifle round. Kohler took over. Then he was killed too, and Richter, who wore the Knight's Cross, stepped in. It felt like command changed hands every few hours. Lampert was also killed, and our gunner Hemfinger got wounded. Fritz Hitz recounted the 8th July fight at Trnavka. He was glad to serve as loader again. He already knew the drill. They rolled out and knocked out a T-34 by a windmill, then another. Took up a position in a cornfield when suddenly a wave of Russians burst from cover shouting, "Ura! Ura!" Schroeder ordered Ludwig to open up with the turret MG, only to learn this Tiger was a command variant. It didn't have one, just extra radios. Schroeder demanded my machine pistol. I handed it over, saying it was madness. He barked it was a direct order. Schroeder popped the hatch and fired at the Russians, but a round slammed into his head. Ludwig shouted to the driver to reverse. As they pulled back, Schroeder's body lay slumped inside. Later, they pulled him out, laid him beneath a tree, and buried him. He was a reckless one, a World War I pilot, and in Hitz's diary, he simply wrote it was a great loss. On 30 July, Richter described how we advanced into no man's land toward Hill 213.9. The Russian defences were a maze of trenches packed up to regiment strength. They'd only pull back at the last second. Bodies left everywhere. Mortars, machine guns. It was a meat grinder. His Tiger drove over a mine. When he stepped out to check, a mortar round exploded nearby, filling his belly with shrapnel. Richter would survive after many hospitals and assignments across Germany. But that was the last we saw of him. Schuffler then took over the company. Slowly, engineers cleared 2 minefields and we pushed on. But the Russians opened up with artillery and puck guns. Gunther Groner, our radio man, was killed that day. Rolf Stettner from 5th Company remembered how the Russians now had new metal sheet mines designed for our Tigers. Before that, they used wood-cased mines. On 1st August, he wrote how Bochmann ordered Tigers and Panzer Eifers free fire at 1,600 meters. Panzer III's swing right. It was to bait the T-34s into chasing the Panzer II-3s so our heavies could slaughter them from the flank. In mid-May, I had been with Kratschützen Regiment Toul. By June, I was pulled into the Tiger Company as a clerk, later on radios. Took leave from 6th to 21st July. By the 27th, we were at the Meuse, ordered to assault Hill 213.9. Radioman Schweizer in Probst's Tiger was killed there. By 2nd August, we loaded in Gorloka, unloaded in Marefa. On 12th August, we struck west of Charkow, aiming for Kosliki. It was a disaster. 2 Tigers lost completely, 3 more crippled. Fein's crew was wiped out, his Tiger burned out, Lampert was killed, Ratzak and Schlab wounded. On the 13th, we pushed on with Grossdeutschland toward Katchalovka. Same on the 14th, heavy losses for both sides. By the 16th, 2 more Tigers were patched up. We guarded Murchik Merla. On the 20th, we thrust toward Kolontayev. SS Sturman Volga was killed. We linked up with Grossdeutschland north of Alexejevka. Russian tanks tried to break out in the morning, but our guns smashed them. Gunner Lorenz took out 2 himself. By the 30th, we attacked with 2 Tigers south of Kolontayu. Pravatsky's Tiger was destroyed by artillery, killing driver Bachmann. Infantry helped take the heights. At 4 a.m., Russians countered. Quade's Tiger took an anti-tank rifle round in the cupola. Winter died instantly. Hilgart was wounded, but managed to steer us to safety. Lehmkuhl wrote that after Meuse, we loaded at Jasnowadaya and headed north by train. Near Walki, we unloaded. The Werkstatt fixed up our battered Tigers with welds and fresh paint. Quaid led us, blind in one eye, but sharp as a hawk. Rathsack commanded 1st Platoon. On the 11th of August, we prepared for action. Quaid planned to hit east-west to stop Russian gains. At 4, we rolled out towards some heights, seeing the wide Ukrainian landscape. At 2.5 kilometers, we spotted a Russian column. Infantry fanned out, then heavy fire. Suddenly, He-111S flew over, carpet bombing them. Our infantry assaulted. Then we were told to pull back, firing a few shells as we did. It was boiling, over 30 degrees. Our Tiger's gears acted up, but Karl Frank fixed it. We washed ourselves from buckets, ate pork from Cook Leubold, then Quaid came racing up in his Kubelwagen. Orders came fast. We were to attack another village. We moved in a wedge. As we neared an anti-tank round hit, our driver was nearly blinded by the flash, radios knocked out. We reversed 200 meters. Then came grim news. Rathsack dead, his gunner wounded, another Tiger burning. Fein's Tiger was hit by a 9.2 centimeter pack. We mounted up, fired MGs, but paid dearly. 7 dead, 3 wounded, 1 Tiger a complete wreck, 4 others damaged. Later, Nebelwerfers howled over our heads, smashing Russian lines. We moved up again, saw the ruined pack positions. That night was eerily quiet. We even captured a Russian officer on horseback. Our infantry dropped his horse. We grabbed the fine leather saddle, handed it to our shoemaker for boots. At 3 a.m., Russian infantry counterattacked. Their cries filled the dark. MG-42s cut them down. By dawn, it was over. We pulled back. That was Totenkopf's last push in the east. Next, we moved to Kolontayev, swamp country, full of pigs and vegetables, good for our stews. By late August, Russian artillery found us. It was 45 degrees inside the tank. Our sweat soaked the seats. Lice feasted on us. A shell fragment flew in my hatch, hit my coffee tin. Later, infantry ran to our Tiger, shouting for help. Quaid ordered, "Driver march," and we rumbled off, straight at the Russians trying to storm our lines. Our onboard MG rattled away, tearing into waves of Russian infantry. We could hear them shouting, "Ura!" over and over, that mad chorus they threw at us whenever they charged. They were trying to force a breakthrough at Kolontaju, clawing at every meter of ground, fighting with a kind of raw desperation that made it feel like the entire battle was personal, as though each Russian was there to hunt us down himself. We beat the attacks back, but there were moments where it didn't feel like we were holding a front line, more like each of us was alone, struggling to survive minute by minute. They just kept coming, even though we could see the ground littered with their dead, and knew the butcher's bill for them was enormous. The old notion of victory had already drained away. Kolontaju wasn't special. It was just another grim day in a string of battles that bled on endlessly. During that time, we had only 3 Tigers still running. We called ourselves the Fire Division, a joke born out of bitter irony because we were constantly under fire and pouring it right back out. We met the Russians head-on several times a day, blasting away with every barrel we had. We would push them back, only to watch them regroup and return. The tank's interior felt like an oven. With all the hatches closed, it was almost unbearable. We sweated in our soaked tunics, sitting cramped shoulder to shoulder as we crawled from one position to the next. Our Tiger was punched full of holes, hits on the hull, the turret, even the running gear. It was a wonder we stayed in one piece. Over just a few days, we launched at least 6 attacks, hammering the Russians only for them to hurl new infantry waves into our guns. We cut them down, watched them melt away under machine gun and cannon fire, leaving the field choked with bodies. At 4 a.m, they opened up on us again with everything: artillery, mortars, Katyusha rockets. A savage bombardment meant to break through the center. It failed, but it felt like only luck spared us. By noon, they tried again. We were on a reverse slope and could lob round after round over our infantry's heads into the Russian masses. I remember our loader, Ernst Vogler, a stoic East Prussian, opening the hatch to dump hot shell casings. At that exact moment, an anti-tank round of cast steel smashed into the tank, ripping through the interior. It struck Vogler square, leaving him fatally wounded, slumped awkwardly as blood soaked into the steel floor. But the fighting didn't stop for his death. It felt like a cruel race. Could we endure until the next Russian salvo passed, or would we finally join Vogler? At one point, Stalin's organ rockets shrieked in. The grenadiers outside, God, I admired them, held firm against what was likely a full Guards rifle division. When the Russians advanced again, our MG tore into them. Hot shell casings poured into my lap as I fed new belts. Eventually, we pushed forward in a counterattack, gaining maybe 100 meters. By nightfall, we were finally able to pull back to fuel up and reload ammunition. A process that dragged on for hours, working by dim lamps and jumpy nerves. Another day dawned with yet more artillery from the Russians, a pounding that threatened to erase the ground beneath us. Totenkopf had been holding this patch for over a week, bleeding the Russians every time they tried to pry us out. But they managed to break through parts of the line, and in the early hours after refueling and taking on shells, we were ordered to counterattack yet again. The Russians had captured heights near Kolontaju, apparently critical terrain. We scraped together every man, even 6 soldiers, from the field dressing stations and set off. We only had 2 operational Tigers left for this. Gone were the days of proud, full-strength companies. What followed was a savage, defensive action, and deep down we could all sense it. The time of victory was behind us. The entire eastern front was bleeding white. Quaid and Lackner's tanks crawled forward. Our grenadiers slogged up the slopes, step by painful step. After the Nebelwerfers fired their howling barrages, our Tigers and a handful of Stugs rolled in, pushing the demoralized Russians back. But the day had more in store. That evening, Russian heavy artillery, 17.2 centimeters, hammered us in regiment-strength salvos. You could feel the earth lurch underfoot, dirt spraying across the hull. We couldn't see anything moving through the haze. Lackner's Tiger, off to our left, suddenly reported engine trouble over the radio. Quade's calm voice crackled back, "Do whatever you can to fix it." Lackner and his crew, Van Kerkum, Privatsky, Bachmann, climbed out under that hellish bombardment to check the engine. That's when a shell exploded nearby. Shrapnel sliced through Bachmann. He collapsed right there on the engine deck, dead. We all knew Bachmann, a solid, loyal driver. It hit hard. Somehow Privatsky got the Tiger limping back to the mechanics under intermittent fire. By 1800, we rolled out again after a short bombardment from our own guns. Fritz Winter, our best technician, was with us. He worked on our damaged recoil system until dusk. We spotted Russians moving on the heights, but they faded back. 2 armoured cars from Recon sat nearby, scanning for threats. Rathsack, who'd been wounded badly back on the 12th, was still in hospital. By September, he'd transferred to a Tiger unit in Normandy, only to be killed there in August 44. Meanwhile, on the 13th, we and 36 Tigers from Grossdeutschland attacked Kachalovka, regrouped, then advanced on Alexeyevka by the 15th. On the 17th, our company knocked out some 40 Russian tanks with only 6 Tigers. Days later, near Kolontarju, we linked up with Grossdeutschland. Everywhere we went, there were more tank duels, more wrecks left burning in muddy fields. On the 20th, we attacked Kolontarju again, driving the Russians back so far that our division met up with Grossdeutschland near Pachomovka. On the 22nd, we counterattacked southeast of Stepanovka. 2 Tigers were knocked out by anti-tank guns. By the 25th, we were preparing to fall back to the Dnieper, the whole front groaning under Russian pressure. On the 30th, Privatsky's Tiger was smashed by artillery near Kolontarju. His radio man Vogler was killed. The next day, fighting continued along the heights. Quade's Tiger took a hit. Shrapnel struck his cupola, killing him. Berger then stepped in to command what was left of us. On the 2nd of August, Salmenich led a scratch force, 1 Tiger, 5 Panzer Rifles, 6 Panzer IIIs, and stopped a massive assault by the Russian Weidewin Guards Corps, destroying 42 tanks in a single action. For that, he received the Knight's Cross. By the 3rd, Kurt Eberling came over from the 2nd SS Panzer Corps Heavy Tiger Battalion to take charge of us. That day, Willy Muller's Tiger was destroyed. As his crew bailed out, Russians caught Muller and beat him to death. His loader Boxleitner died too. On the 4th, Grams led an ad hoc infantry Kampfgruppe of tankless crews, including men from our company, to clear woods. Recklin was killed, Saxe and Fischer wounded. Franz von Berg earned an Iron Cross for his stand that day. By then, we were tied to I Battalion, fighting around Hill 136.5 and Marchailivka. Between the 8th and 9th, we clashed between Kotelevka and Suboka. As Totenkopf fell back to Poltawa, autumn rains turned roads into deep, sucking mud. On the 21st, we loaded at Poltawa. Our battered battalion was to convert to Panthers and retrain. Half the crews stayed behind, becoming replacements for the 2nd Battalion. Through September, Totenkopf was still fighting west of Poltawa, crossing the Dnieper near Kremenchug. By the 27th, we sent a detail to Dnipropetrovsk to collect 5 new Tigers. By October, our repair platoon set up shop in Koristovka, new recruits trickling in. Our armoured recon company was dissolved after losing nearly all their Panzer IIIs. By then, we were ghosts of the proud armoured spearheads we had once been. Our uniforms were stained with sweat, mud, and oil. We stank of cordite and dried blood. Each day we rode out felt like gambling with death. And more often than not, death was the one smiling. By the 1st of September, 1943, we found ourselves back at the Werkstatt, trying to scrape together enough serviceable machines to keep the company breathing. We didn't even have any officers left. SS Hauptscharführer Berger, our old Spieß, had taken over as de facto company commander. Orders came down quickly. The Russians had torn a 700-kilometer gash open east of the Dnieper River. The Rundstedt Bridge, built back in 1941, had already been blown on the 30th of August. By the 6th of October, the Russians reached the Dnieper's banks and began to pour across. On the 7th, our company mustered in Uspenskoye. By the 8th, we were already thrown into an assault on the Kareda Peninsula. The place was littered with bodies. German and Russian infantry both. We pushed through, took the ground, but it was costly. Berger commanded us through the operation. For the rest of October, we dug in on the defensive, bouncing around from west of Kremenchug to Protopopauka, Alexandria, Ivanovka, Nikolaevka. Everywhere the same: churned mud, burnt villages, tanks with scarred armor. Our Tiger was damaged again. The autumn rains arrived, turning roads into slippery swamps. We slogged through the mud north of Krivoy Rog, half our crew always outside, hooking cables or hacking out ruts. Loading one of our battered Tigers at Korostauka turned into pure chaos. Just as we were fastening chains to the rail flat cars, 2 stray T-34s rolled up out of nowhere and opened fire. We dropped everything, diving for cover. It was mines that finally knocked the Russians out. By the next morning, it got worse. Around 800, nearly 50 Russian tanks showed up, trailing infantry. At the station, fresh Wehrmacht units had just arrived from the Italian front. They panicked under the sudden bombardment. Trucks jackknifed, horses bolted, men ran. The situation was saved by Oberst Rudel's Stukas screaming down, tank-busting cannons blazing. We opened up with everything we had, watching the T-34s brew up one after another. The Russians fled their burning tanks, many cut down by machine gun fire. When it was all over, 47 enemy tanks lay knocked out. Weeks of this kind of fighting left us hollow. We regrouped at Bobrinez, a ghost of the force we once were. There, we were reorganized under a new company commander, SS Obersturmbannführer Bethke. Another new face, SS Untersturmführer Neff, joined us, along with Knevel, Heimbruch, Weidner, and Krischer. We received replacement Tigers, these with the new cupolas like the Tiger II, small consolation for tired crews. Through December, we kept up limited operations. Despite being wrung out, we could still fight in company strength when it mattered. Ever since pulling back across the Dnieper, it was obvious. We could still bite, but we were bleeding out. On the 3rd of October, we took delivery of 5 new Tigers in Protopopauka. The Russians weren't letting up. Their bridgeheads over the Dnieper were growing daily. On the 7th, we were back in Uzbenskoye, and by the next day, thrown into a Kampfgruppe striking the Kolerda Peninsula. One of our Tigers suffered an internal blast that wrecked the commander's hatch. Somehow, by sheer luck, no one was hurt. The next day, Russian breakthroughs near Chikaloka forced us to counterattack again. Damaged Tigers were hauled into the Werkstatt by the 10th. I still remember how, in Korostauka, we were loading tanks when 2 more T-34s showed up and started shelling the rail yard. Mines took care of them, but it was only the start. Next morning, more Russian tanks and infantry attacked, saved only by a flight of Ju-87s, Stukas with their 3.7 centimeter cannons roaring through, hammering the Soviets back. Mid-October saw us lunging into counterattacks. On the 15th, our Tigers charged into Zaporozhye. By the 18th, Totenkopf was put into reserve near Paulich and Onufrievka, slogging through hellish rains that made every road a ribbon of mud. On the 20th, we were west of Ivanovka. The next day, we crossed the Ingulez and assaulted Russian positions outside Alexandria and later Ivanovka. Totenkopf was finally upgraded to a full panzer division. The 24th, we were ordered to clear out a Russian pocket near Dutje. We did, but as we nosed into a nearby wood, Russian artillery bracketed us, shrapnel hissing off our hull. Walter Naum's diary captures the time with brutal simplicity. On 1st October, he waited at Znamenka for a train, hoping for rest, but by chance he discovered the regiment was closer than thought, found himself in Protopopauka, sharing news. Lasch, Gutmann, Richards all wounded, Palm and Westerberg badly burned, Kreutzberger wounded, Friedrich and Meltz promoted and wearing iron crosses. The regiment was down to 9 operational tanks. The rest were crippled since Mius. I battalion was already sent back to Germany to convert to Panthers. The recon platoon disbanded, almost wiped out. Over the next days, he and Nutzenberger maneuvered to join us. By the 5th, the Spies unofficially told them they were ours. Through the 10th, nothing much changed, just letters from home, reading, weapon cleaning. Autumn turned suddenly cold. On the 11th, orders came sending Nutzenberger off to lead a platoon in 6th Company. That night, they toasted with chicken, potatoes, Crimean wine, and vodka. By mid-October, they were still living in a house run by an old woman who made endless potato pancakes. Nam described night skies thick with aircraft, lame ducks droning above. On the 15th, they trucked into Kremenchug to clean out regimental offices under heavy Russian artillery. They even chased down chickens for the pot. By the 16th, they formally chose to come to our Tiger Company, though there weren't enough billets, so they stayed at HQ. Rain fell without pause by the 17th. It was the beginning of Rasputitsa, the dreaded mud season. By the 19th, the Russians had broken through 30 kilometers away, hammering the rail line near Alexandria. Even then, we had uniform inspections. The war didn't stop for regulations. By the 20th, we were officially with the Tiger Company, but quarters were still tight. That day, American-supplied P-39s buzzed us. Those low, angry planes the Russians used for ground attacks. We ducked into a half-built sauna bath as they roared overhead. On the 22nd, Russian bridgeheads ballooned 150 kilometers long, 20 wide, aimed at Odessa. The thunder of guns rolled over us day and night. We had only a handful of tanks left. By the 25th, we moved to Znamenka. The next day, our Tigers received new engines. The Totenkopf assembled near Protopopavka and Alexandria by the 27th. That night, we were shaken awake. Russian tanks were reported to have broken through. We threw on gear and raced toward the sounds. In the grey light, we discovered it was actually a Wehrmacht unit repositioning in the dark, nearly causing a disaster. Air battles raged overhead on the 28th. The 24th Panzer Division arrived from Italy and slotted in beside us, clearly new to the Eastern Slog. Nam wrote of guards, reading, potato pancakes, even building a sauna. By the 29th, our Tigers teamed up with Panthers from Das Reich and advanced toward Olympiadovka, then Malinovka, ambushing a Russian column. The next day, we attacked Volchanka and Novopetrovka. On the 31st, we moved from Lashevka to Grafit, our crews dead tired but still operational. Nam's last notes from late October were strangely domestic, guard duty, reading, killing chickens for soup, yet he also wrote how Russian artillery raked our lines daily, how new fighters with shark mouths strafed roads, and how their bridgeheads kept growing. Even in quiet hours, we could hear the distant, hollow boom of heavy guns. It was a strange season, potato pancakes by candlelight, then hours later, diving inside a Tiger as shells pounded the mud outside. No grand illusions anymore. We were just trying to hold the line until the next order came. Each day, a new gamble with death. On the 29th of October, they gave us our marching orders at 4 a.m. Both our Tiger Company and the headquarters elements packed up, engines coughing to life in the cold dark. We set off down roads, choked with everything. Supply columns, retreating civilians, horse carts, armoured vehicles. The route wound through Novopraga, Alexandria, Kristinovka and Protopopavka. As we crawled along, we passed Panthers from Das Reich, headed to the front, and wrecked reminders of previous battles, burned out T-34s, twisted Soviet self-propelled guns, half sunken into the mud. By evening, we finally rolled into Protopopavka, exhausted from hours of jolting rides and constant stops. The 1st of November brought a strange quiet. We could still hear the constant artillery grumbling in the distance, like some giant rolling stones far away. After lunch, the Spies came by to tell us that Baidke, our company commander, would be launching a counterattack the next morning. We turned in early, knowing full well sleep was precious and would be short. By the 2nd, Neuner was off on home leave. I remember watching him climb onto a truck at 6 in the evening, waving, his figure shrinking in the gloom. Lucky devil. Baidke arrived not long after, assigning Pelzer as his gunner. Meanwhile, Wolf had to step out of our Tiger. He'd caught a nasty fever that left him shivering even inside his thick uniform. On the 3rd, we took a long drive, loaded up on a Maltier, a weird half-truck, half-track contraption, bouncing along for about 60 kilometers. The roads were lined with burnt husks of T-34s and shattered supply wagons. Still, no sign of Wolf getting better. Next day we sat tight. He was a little improved, though he looked like death warmed over. The 5th passed quietly, just scuttlebutt and short rations. That morning, commanders from the 8th Army and the 40th Panzer Corps paid our division high praise for holding the line. It was good to hear though it did nothing to warm our frozen bones. Then, on the 7th, we were up at 6, loading up again. Our Tigers were still back being patched together. The roads were treacherous. Slick mud turned our convoy into a snake slithering from one side of the track to the other. By 4 in the afternoon, we reached new quarters. It rained all night, and on the 8th, we woke to find everything had turned into deep slush. Only the Maltese could keep moving, but the rain didn't let up. By the 9th, about 30 of us were called together for orders. It was another uneasy day, no big moves. On the 11th, with little else to do, we went to watch a film, I Love You. The canteen gave us coffee and cake, and 2 lucky fellows managed to get champagne, so we made a small celebration of it that evening. The 12th was much the same. We caught Balparet at the cinema, hardly new, but a distraction, while the company took delivery of fresh ammunition. On the 13th, at 5 in the morning, the front lit up. Brisk gunfire echoed down from the lines. Wolfgang went off with the advance party. Rudy and Sablotny had already left the day before. On the road, I saw our regimental commander, Bochmann, himself directing traffic, barking orders to keep things moving. By afternoon, we were pulling back toward Bayrak, the village crammed with soldiers and wagons. We pitched a small tent, built a fire, and settled in. Before dawn on the 14th, the sky split open. At 6 sharp, the Russians unleashed a hurricane of artillery, a pounding drum that seemed to make the whole world shudder. We loaded up everything that would roll. By 10, our Tigers were ordered to push forward and engage the Russians wherever we found them. Throughout the day, Russian shells kept falling into our rear areas. That day, our regiment claimed 60 Russian tanks destroyed, 28 by our Tiger company alone. Wolfgang ended up driving a ZG Kau with the combat units, risking the same hell as us. The 15th was a mirror of the day before. Great artillery duels and constant air attacks. Russian fighter bombers roared in, doing to us what our Stukas once did to them. Our Tigers burned through mountains of ammunition. The 16th was no different. That night we all gathered around for eggnog, Haja, Beidke, a handful of others, and tried to forget the war for a moment. 4 of our Tigers made it back to our position, battered but breathing. Still stuck in Bayrak on the 17th. By evening, the Russians hammered us with another savage mix of artillery and mortars. Miraculously, we suffered no losses. Biber joined us that day too. Seemed the barracks were getting cramped again. The 18th, we organised trucks to haul all our tech, gear and tools, though we had to give the company commander's truck back. A damaged T-34 had been converted into a makeshift recovery vehicle. We used it to tow our crippled Tigers off the line 3 or 4 times. It sat waiting on the roadside, though at one point it quit on us. None of us had a clue how to revive a Russian tank, but one mechanic from the Instanstaffel got it humming again. That night, we feasted on roasted potatoes, eggs from the cook, with Neff fiddling some tune and reminiscing about how beautiful France was. Biber was awarded the Iron Cross First Class. He deserved it. That same night, Feldmarschall von Manstein sent us a message. Bravo, SS Totenkopf, you are fantastic men. I couldn't add anything more. By the 20th, I was up at 1400. Wolf still dozing. Beidke had been up since before dawn. Then it came. A colossal Russian attack, artillery of every caliber, even monstrous 17.5 centimeter shells. The ground rocked under us, walls cracked. Someone shouted for me to run to the Instanstaffel, but the way was blocked. I watched Wolf dart through the barrage toward the supply section, waving them back. Haja and Wolf managed to move the T-34 Berger Panzer. Before they did, they tore off the swastika flag. It wouldn't do to have it blazing on a Russian chassis. We pulled out of Bayrak under constant shell fire. Civilians streamed along behind us, carts creaking. We didn't dare leave until dusk, hoping darkness would hide us. Wolfgang Barth wrote in his journal on the 21st that he drove fuel and ammo to the front. An easy trip, he claimed. By then, Ede Pelzer had already destroyed 18 Russian tanks. On the 22nd, we left for Shoshenkovo. By evening, we were settled in surprisingly fine quarters. The next morning brought frost, then more rain. Wolf and I spent the day scrubbing everything. No lice, finally clean. The 24th, with mud thick on the roads, we finally spent a night inside a Tiger, getting real sleep, if cold. By the 25th, the rain stopped, replaced by a bitter freeze. On the 29th, the commander's crew earned Iron Crosses. We tried moving, only to be bogged in mud, so deep we barely reached a bridge where another tiger had collapsed through. We circled back later to help. That night I nearly shot myself with a flare pistol, fumbling it like a green recruit. December opened with us being towed by 4 18-ton Zigiku. Along the way, we smashed into 15 carts loaded with T-mines. My heart stopped, thinking we'd explode, but by some miracle, they didn't. Wolf jumped off the tiger, nearly shot his own nose with his MP as it snagged. We laughed, but shakily. By the second, we were sewing up our winter kit. Wolf moved over as gunner for Holzner, while I joined Hurik's crew. On the 5th, snow finally came, second advent, and the Spiess dropped by. The 9th, I felt wretched, probably sinusitis. Wolf stayed with Holzner. By the 10th, Russian breakthroughs near Kirovograd sent us scrambling to support the infantry. The air was alive with planes. My ear eased by the next day, just in time for my tiger to arrive. But soon I was fevered again, 40 degrees, Wolf packing my kit, off to the aid station. The 12th, I lay in bed, artillery rumbling. We didn't even know where the Russians were. It felt like the front might snap. On the 13th, still under covers, I listened to the distant guns, thinking we were on the brink of encirclement. By the 14th, Pavlu arrived, once commandant of Krakow, decent enough fellow. Christmas Eve was strangely quiet. I did my turn on guard duty, shivering under the stars. Orders came daily, parades nearly as often. The frost was savage in those days. Through November and December, we fought across Grafit, Balka, Vlasovskaya, and Mariampol. At Mariampol, we captured Hill 138.8 under constant Russian counterattacks. Early December saw us clawing near Anauka, Iskrovka, then east of Kopani. By the 7th, we regrouped in Losowatka, then moved into Bayrak. By the 14th, we smashed the Russian 32nd Guards Tank Brigade. 60 tanks gone, 28 to our Tigers. Bayermeyer, commanding us, was nominated for the Knight's Cross, rightly so. We pulled back to Krasno-Konstantinovka, refueled, rearmed, trying to find breath in a war that never seemed to stop. Manstein's Bravo Totenkopf rang hollow by then. All I knew was the crack of the hatch, the stink of scorched oil, and the fear we'd never see home again. November brought fresh faces to Dolinskaya. I remember Sklensky, Rettinger, and Sperner showing up, new to 9th Company, along with Hoffmann, Birke, Schneider, and Werner from the Pioneer Company. Werner ended up with our Instand Staffel. Meanwhile, some of our old hands like Probst, Fischer, Leudold, and even our Spiess, Benneker, finally got home leave. Bernhardt moved into a gunner's seat, green but eager. On the 15th, our Tigers knocked out another 10 Russian tanks in the afternoon, just north of Bayrak. The following day, we smashed another Russian attack east of Krasno-Konstantinovka. By the 17th, our encampment caught mortar and artillery fire. I can still hear the distant whistling that always seemed to grow louder and closer all at once. Despite it, our armoured group rolled out, counter-attacking on Hill 16, 8.2, and again on Hill 173.1. The 18th brought logistics headaches. 2 Tigers were loaded onto rail transports bound for long-term overhaul, while a captured T-34 we'd been using for recovery operations rattled its way out to haul back 6 Panzer IVs stuck well ahead of our lines. Between the 19th and 21st, we pressed on with local counterattacks near Krasno-Konstantinovka, scrapping around Hill 164.9. 3 of our Panzer Y4s were knocked out on the 21st. I'll never forget the 22nd. Vollmer and Weidner were commanding Tigers, already loaded on flat cars, about to depart, when a lone T-34 nosed up close. Weidner didn't hesitate. He slammed into the gunner's position, cranked the turret by hand, rammed an anti-tank round into the breach. But before he could fire, the T-34 slipped off the rail embankment into a ditch. 2 of our men grabbed satchel charges, lobbed them onto the Soviet tank's engine deck. Both went up in thunderous cracks, flames licking out. The T-34 crew spilled out. One tried to surrender, another was gunned down, trying to flee. The last man, the driver, got stuck halfway out. 20 minutes later, the T-34 cooked off, turret flying into the air like a child's toy. Despite Russian troops prowling nearby, the rail convoy lurched away, rattling off toward Shevchenkovo by the 24th. By then, we held a meager mobile reserve, 1 Tiger and 3 Stugs. The next day, that Tiger and 2 Stugs supported an infantry scratch team. On the 27th, 1 Tiger joined the 2nd Grenadier Regiment 203 in a counter-attack at Ovrag Bashtanka. The next day, disaster. 1 Tiger broke through a bridge, another gave out with engine trouble. By the 30th, we were down to using a single Tiger as a reserve covering Novo Ganovka and beyond. Come December 1st, SS Untersturmführer Schienhofen arrived. He'd done time with SS Infantry Regiment 9, then the Totenkopf's Sturmgeschütze battery. We'd heard he finished courses at Braunschweig, picked up his officer's bars back in March. He joined us right then. 1 Tiger left operational near Novo Petrovka, 11 under repair in Dolinskaya, another 11 awaiting major work. On the 3rd, we fought a regimental-sized Russian push near Grigorjevka, but couldn't budge them off Hill 170.2. By the 6th, we were idling at Novo Petrovka. On the 7th, we counterattacked at Duchny, then fell back to support lines near Chabanovka. Biber caught a wound that day. Next morning, we held positions near Novo Praga and the Lenin Collective Farm, tigers growling as we scanned the tree lines. The 10th, we supported infantry near Dolinskaya. Then, on the 12th, 7 battered tigers were sent back to Germany for complete factory refits. The 14th, Pavlu joined us. Strange man, he'd been town commandant in Krakow, now commanding a tiger. Later, he'd earn a commission, but his life ended in suicide years after the war. Between the 15th and Christmas Eve, we were strangely busy with small things, organizing a Christmas party in Dolinskaya. By the 29th, we were running tank drills again. We greeted the new year with schnapps and a rough party, but it didn't last. On New Year's Eve, Eberling took a bullet through the upper arm. Bad enough he'd spend the rest of the war in hospital. At least he found a nurse there, later his wife. Also on the 31st, we received new Tiger engines, badly needed. The 5th of January 1944, the real storm broke. Massive Russian assaults on Kirovograd and Zhytomyr. The line cracked in 2 places. We were pulled under the 52nd Army Corps, attached to the 13th Panzer Division. The 6th, under Lachmann, we shifted to Ingolo-Kamenka. The 7th, we attacked north of Nikolaevka. 3 Tigers took hits. The 8th, we fought defensively near Fedorovka and Otradauka, linked up with Grossdeutschland. New winter uniforms came down the line. The 9th, 6 new Tiger engines flew in. The 10th, we received 2 big half-tracks for towing. By the 11th, we were back with Totenkopf at Bobrines. On the 12th, we ran full technical overhauls on the Tigers, then moved into Ronoje on the 13th. January 15th, we pushed near Bolshaya Vaika, conducting local counterattacks by Osyanikovska alongside the 11th Panzer Division. The next day, an attack launched out of Petrovka was shredded by Russian AT guns. 4 Tigers lost near Hill 215.6. On the 17th, another Tiger took a hit at Mikhailovka. On the 18th, we tried again. Same ground, same result. By the 19th, we were pulling back to Nowo Ukrainka, spent the 20th cleaning rifles and scrubbing uniforms. Lemkul wrote it stark in his diary. On the 16th, 6 Tigers assaulted Petroka. Pavlus was knocked out. Nawatril, our radio man, gravely wounded. The 18th was a copy, same terrain, same AT guns, wrecking us. By February it went oddly quiet. The Wiking Division was up north, trapped in the Korsun pocket. On the 28th, we were in Alexejevka. Dawn broke with a Russian barrage so heavy it rattled our teeth. A new offensive underway. March 3rd, we were ordered to Ivanovka to back up Grossdeutschland. Bedke led 4 Tigers. Our Tiger's gun barrel took a direct hit. We tried a test shot. Useless. At Novo-Ukrainka, we recalibrated under Russian eyes. Then a sudden call. Russians had broken through. Bedke spun us around, launched a relief attack. A shell took out his cupola. He died there, iron shrapnel through his head. Muka died from another blast. From the 20th to 24th, it was dull village duty, washing, shaving, complaining. The 25th, heavy shelling followed by infantry attacks. We beat them back, but our Tigers needed serious repairs. Roll calls and inspections followed. Krakow was named our sponsor town, which felt surreal. Back home, they were probably knitting scarves for us. On the 29th, we fought near Petrovka, smashing a Russian AT front, but our tanks were starving for ammo, many badly damaged. Naratil was hit again. The 31st 9 Russian tanks fell to our guns. February opened with us in the 2nd Squadron of the 2nd Panzer Regiment 3's assembly area. One Tiger had to tow a self-propelled gun under Russian artillery. The next days were filled with signals drills, maintenance. By the 6th, an alarm, camouflage paint, stripped off the Tigers, ready to roll. On the 7th, a shocking report. 40 of our tank crews had no tanks left. The 9th, Baidke tested all our radios. The 10th, we did more servicing. By the 11th, 30 men got home leave. Lucky devils. The 12th, we were so low on rations, they talked about opening the iron emergency kits. But on the 13th, fresh supplies arrived, and we fried up potato pancakes. The 15th brought letters from home, some with schnapps, beer. The 16th, a brutal snowstorm. By the 18th, a Tiger had to haul a stuck Panzer IV through deep snow. The 21st, 3 Tigers broke down, needed towing to Werkstatt. The 22nd was quiet. We ran engines just to keep them alive. Bethke inspected our support trains on the 23rd. By the 25th, we rolled out to probe Russian movements. False alarm, back we went. Another Tiger broke down. The 26th, more maintenance. The 27th, Lachmann formally took over SS Panzer Regiment 3. The 28th was so quiet it felt eerie. We bathed, wrote letters, almost felt human again. March 3rd, 4 Tigers counterattacked near Novo Alexandrovka. Bethke's new Tiger took a hit to the barrel. It was ruined. He switched tanks, pressed on, but that afternoon a shell struck the commander's cupola, killing him outright. Some said it was the 11th. By the 5th, our Tigers were spread thin, propping up Totenkopf's battered front. The 8th, we were sent to stiffen the 320th Infantry. A-OK. 8 wanted us down in Balta. The 9th, we covered the eastern exits of Bolshnaya Viska. Another Kampfgruppe moved to Ivanovka to bail out Grossdeutschland. The 10th, parts of SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment 6 and a few Stugs bolstered Grossdeutschland. We were fighting around Alexejevka and Kolhoz Gurjevka. By the 11th, Totenkopf was loading onto trains. Meanwhile, our Tigers and remaining Panzer IIIs and IVs were still south of Raskopana, fending off more Russian armour that burst through our lines. That afternoon, we repeated it all, bled for every hedgerow. The army wanted us at Kriwoj Osero as quickly as we could load. So we went, haunted, hollow, still clinging to the old dream that somehow we'd pull off one last miracle on this endless eastern front.